Thank you. Good afternoon. So the speakers this morning covered a lot of very specific information about VR, the markets, the use cases, how it's growing, what the technology is doing, what it's capable of. When we look at it, what we're doing is making much more fundamental technologies, and therefore we have to ask much more basic questions, because our investments are covering not just years, but decades. So when I start to think about what is coming next in alternate realities, I start to ask myself, well, what's wrong with this one? I like the reality that I live in right now. And it's all worked pretty well for us for several decades now. So why do we need to change it? What is it that we get that's better? How is the world different in a way that's useful to us in alternate realities? So it's not until I start to think about what's better, and I start to ask that question not just of technologists, not just of business people, but of science fiction writers, that I start to understand not just where we're going, but why it's important for us to go there. So first, I have to take a look at what's reality. Well, now, my mother is an English teacher, and she taught me that reality is made of stuff, which is basically nouns, people, places, and things. Or the way we think about it technically is people, objects, and environments. We also have a layer of data, the abstract information about people, places, and things. And we started to collect all of that information into a layer that we have called the internet, right? And it's part of our world. It's abstract. We can't see it, but it's become part of our fundamental conception of what reality is. So when we start to think about virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, what we're talking about is still nouns, people, places, and things. And in each of these technologies, the difference between them is essentially which part of that people, places, and things is digital, which part's real, which can we turn on or off. Now, in virtual reality, we use video game technologies to render environments, objects, and people, either the avatars of real people or the characters of digital people. The entire digital world is rendered to you through a box that you put on your face. Now, if you put that box in your face and you make it see-through, then you can start to extend into augmented reality. So I can see this environment that's real, and I can add into it objects that are digital, or people that are digital. So you can see things like the temperature of a machine, or you can see things like a gear or a character. So that gives us those three fundamental types of technologies. Now, most analysts believe that over time, these will converge. So first we see virtual reality on the upswing as the consumer price points come down, as content becomes available, as it becomes high quality, as it becomes affordable. Then we'll see the upswing in augmented reality. That's as organizations and companies start using augmented reality in the course of their operations. So if you can see a widget that you can repair in augmented reality, you can start to roll that out into the rest of your organization, eventually to your own customers. And then eventually, sometime past 2020, we don't know exactly when, we believe that these technologies will start to converge on what we call mixed reality. So the ultimate promise is that each of these technologies will be able to turn on or off one of those layers and to give the user whatever is the right experience at the time for the use case that they have. That's the Holy Grail. So this represents a step change not just in our technical capabilities, but in our everyday lives and how we relate to technology and how we relate to other people through that technology. So when the internet first became accessible to you and me, we started to have all of that data layer available to us, right? We have all of the information in the world at our fingertips. And that fingertips part is really important, right? Because the way that you consume that information, that layer of reality, is that you go somewhere, you sit down, you look at a rectangle made of glass, and you type, right? And now that's available to you, and that's what the experience is. Well, then we start to shrink that down, and our panes of glass become much smaller. You can put them in our pocket, and the mobile revolution happens. Importantly, it's not just the ability to bring the internet with you. A mobile phone is not just a window into that data layer, it's also a package of sensors. So we can start to see the GPS signal, the compass, some have barometers, right? And we start to understand the people, places, and environments and objects that are around you. And we start to be able to make decisions about that information. We know that you are sitting in this room, that you're facing this direction, that it's raining. And we can start to change the experience that we're delivering to you based upon that context, right? So, however, we're still consuming that experience, that now contextual experience that's now related to the real world through a pane of glass. So then what happens when you start to be able to put that on your face? You no longer have to have it at your fingertips, but now it's at your voice. Now it is seamlessly blended into the world around you. It's not just a content delivery mechanism. And it's not just a one-to-one relationship. I have a relationship with my piece of glass, my mobile technology, and you have with yours. Your piece of glass is not mine. So once we see through that pane of glass and we seamlessly blend these experiences that are contextual together, you're not just consuming information about the world. You are experiencing the world that's augmented, it's been created, it's contextual, and more importantly, it's shared. So you and I can look at this room and agree that I am standing on this stage, you are sitting in that chair, and there is a very large bunny rabbit standing right next to you. Or there could be. Like, we would experience that as being real. Now, in my office, I can walk through the hallways, and I instinctively walk around the holograms that my coworkers are working on, regardless of whether or not I can see them. Because I'm understanding that reality is different. And I'm understanding that my coworkers and I are sharing that experience. So what happens then? Once you can see things seamlessly in your world, digital objects, environments, and people at the same time, what do? Well, a few things that are pretty obvious start to happen. One being you need fewer pieces of glass. Now, I spoke to the Dean of Dentistry at the University of Washington, and his wish for this technology is only that he's able to eliminate the 4 screens that you have to have around the dental chair in order to see all the information. And he's saying that his patients feel claustrophobic because they've got too many screens around him, but he still needs that information. All he wants to do with this is give the patients back their space. And that's it. And that's pretty easy to predict and to see. So, however, in a dentist chair, you still want to be sitting down. At least when I have nitrous on, I want to be sitting down. There are other situations which you still want to be sitting down. Maybe you're making a complicated financial model and you have to think it through. But a lot of work gets done today around the coffee maker. We're not necessarily sitting down at our desks. We're doing our work through talking to our coworkers who might be standing with us, or we might perceive them as standing with us. And that changes the nature of work, particularly information work or conversational work as it might become. So there are companies that are today using this technology to do sales right now for very large and expensive things like buildings or aircraft. So that instead of sitting here in the chair and seeing my beautiful rectangle of glass, my customer can walk around inside a virtual representation of the building that they are going to buy. Right? It changes the nature of work and it changes the conversation. Not only can you do that, once you're changing the nature of the context around you, what you're doing is pushing information to that user. That's very different than the way we think about the way the internet works today. Right? So right now, we have a pull model. We think about clicks. We think about tracking user data as they pull things. But it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for me to walk over there and click on the floor and type in the URL of a bunny rabbit and then have you do the same thing. That makes no sense whatsoever. In order to have a seamless experience, we have to have a push-based internet. Now, we can all visualize a horrible world in which the entire advertising industry comes to us, pushed in billboards around us all the time. That's terrible. Nobody wants that. But we do have to start thinking differently about the way the internet works and about the way that we have a relationship with it. So once you have that contextual information pushed to you, you can start to do things like supporting tasks of task workers. So you can push the information about the particular machine that you are fixing right now and all of the context of that machine, its history, its repair log, and you can give that to a worker just in time, just when they need it, just where they need it, and give them access to it. Closely related to that is a training scenario. There are companies today that are using this technology to start training their workforce on using and repairing complex technologies. So oftentimes these are taking place in a field or out in a warehouse. So the resource industries are heavy consumers of this, things like mining, oil, and gas. Those are real-world use cases that you're using together. And of course, we've heard a lot about the use of entertainment. Now, the idea is not just that we would have virtual reality in the box in our face, but as we seamlessly blend reality and digital layers of reality, we can make the world that we have slightly more magical. So we can all play Pokemon Go without going like this over dinner, which my friends do. And we can have on our walls paintings that behave like the magical paintings in the Harry Potter universe. We can make the world around us slightly more engaging. And we can do that through entertainment. So that starts to give us the categories of the uses that companies are already putting this technology to. And these are very similar to basically every time we've had a major step change in technological improvement. So for instance, you could look at the same categories for introduction of PC, of tablets, of mobile. And they're generally cost reduction, product development, operational improvement, and new capability. So in cost reduction, we see right now those field technicians that I'm talking about being able to get access to remote experts who are not in the field. That's one of the most expensive things for people to get on, expensive experts on planes and send them out to the field in order to fix one thing in a day. Whereas you can then remove that expert from the field, and a field technician can not only see what is in front of them, but they can convey that to the expert. The expert can then take another step and actually draw in space in front of that field technician, no, you want to turn the valve this way and not that way. Right? It's a major cost reduction technology being deployed as we speak around the world. Product development is another thing that allows you to prototype much faster and more cheaply even than 3D printing, particularly when it's necessary to do so at scale. So for instance, we can see, if I put this refrigerator here, will it fit? You can also see if I'm going to remodel my store and move a wall from here to there, what is that going to do to the sunlight in the afternoon? So you can start to see contextual information, very rich data about the world, and essentially a cheap and easy solution that just fits on your head, right? So there's another technology that's starting to be used in software, and that is the ability to enhance video, particularly with motion. You can do other things like temperature, but you can start to see, as an exaggerated fashion, the motion of a physical object. Now, right now, you do this in video. Like in a YouTube video, you can start to see an exaggerated motion of a bridge swaying. So now you can physically see where the stress points are in that bridge. And that technology has been applied to 2D video that has already been captured. It has not yet been applied to VR, AR, and MR, but it can. So that's where we start to get into prediction and thinking about what can we actually do in the future once we have ubiquitous technology like this. Now, it's easy for us to start to say things like, you need fewer screens. It is very difficult for us to predict things like timing, things like the convergence of multiple technologies, particularly if it's a technology we know about, converging with a technology that is outside of our personal expertise. That's really difficult. And it's also really incredibly difficult to predict second-order effects. So as an example, this is a painting in 1902 titled "Leaving the Opera in the Year 2000." So now you see there's some flying cars here. In 1902, cars existed and airplanes did not, or at least that they didn't work. So you see like little fish fins on the cars here. They didn't quite know how that was going to work. You do see some accurate things. These cars are electric. You see the little electric light bulbs on them in a time when gas was mainly the lighting technology. We start to see that there are different types of vehicles, things that look like motorcycles and things that look like buses, and that they're individual types of transport. You're missing something like Uber, right? There's no Uber in the year 2000, apparently taking away from the opera. The larger things that they missed is that if you have ubiquitous electricity, you change the unit economics in entertainment away from opera and towards movies. You also start thinking, well, we do have electric cars, we don't really have flying cars. They are not economical right now. It took us 100 years to get to electric cars. Who knows how long it takes us to get to flying cars, and you probably don't want your neighbors driving them. At least I don't. So that tells us where our blind spots are. Where is it that we can predict accurately enough to make an investment in the long term about the technology, and where can't we? And that tells us we should be able to make decisions about what this technology is going to existing workflows, existing technologies, and existing things like social media that are ubiquitous. It's really starting to be difficult to do things like predict its convergence with biology. We do know today that there are medical schools that are using this technology to start training their students so that you can see the structures in motion within the human body in a way that is much, much cheaper than using a cadaver and gives you information that you could never have in the real world. And those are the types of technologies that we can make good predictions. The last thing that is much less obvious, maybe you can see it just covered there, is that there's this dapperly dressed gentleman handing a corseted lady into the car. They failed to predict that physical mobility would lead to social mobility. And that is the same kind of thing that we are talking about figuring out today, which is why I often rely on science fiction. So this last year, 2016, there was a case of a woman playing a video game in VR for the very first time. She'd never used VR before, she had used video games before. Her experience was that the video game in VR was so viscerally real that she immediately forgot that it was a game. To her, it was just real. It took all of her senses. And there was a case where a gentleman, who knows who he was, random anonymous dude, came up to her avatar in the game, approached her personal space, and his virtual avatar virtually assaulted her virtual avatar. But because her brain was wrapped up in this being real, the trauma of the experience was also real. So she wrote it down. And the video game company understood that this was their game and they needed to fix it, so they fixed it immediately. And what they did is that they created a personal bubble, so that if somebody comes too close to you, they simply disappear from your view and you from theirs. Now, there is an episode of the sci-fi show Black Mirror that explores this idea of what happens if, like on Facebook, when you block somebody, you can actually block somebody physically from view. It's a social effect that we have absolutely no idea how to think about. But it happens today in an actual virtual reality game that's running. So now, science fiction is above all fiction, and drama is, of course, meant to portray problems and to explore our reactions to problems. But it's useful to us to start to step back and think, if we are changing the way that reality works, if we are changing the way our perception works, then not only are we changing entertainment, not only are we changing work, we're also changing social relationships in a way that we haven't really yet begun to understand. But that's the work of the people in this room. And the work of the people that we've seen as speakers before is to start to understand those long-term implications, to blend in digital versions of physical things that we haven't built yet, of environments, planets, places that we've never been to, bunny rabbits that may or may not be standing next to us, So what we're creating today is a technological leap that is just as significant as bringing the internet to us or bringing a supercomputer into our pocket. What comes next right now is science fiction. Thank you.
So I kind of wanted to frame this conversation kind of around a new reality, but I think there's actually a new business reality happening. My talk here today is going to be kind of our story around our business on what we're doing, how we're doing it, but really importantly, why. Like, what is our strategy and what are the tactics we're using to approach the market? You know, we kind of look at, and it's been talked about a lot at this conference, we kind of look at some exponential technologies. Things are really driving radical change in how we do things. You know, this includes obviously artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and I put kind of AR, MR, and VR, we're just going to call it kind of holographic technology for now. It's just one concept while I'm doing this talk. And as has been spoken to, I mean, there's definitely kind of a grand convergence happening. And it's really important to understand the historical significance of this moment in time, because this has only happened in a few periods of time, and it's a real tremendous business opportunity for people to kind of tackle this. And I'm going to kind of talk about a little context with a little bit of story. How many people in the crowd is wine drinkers? Do we have wine drinkers here? All right, this is good. Alcoholics, that's great. I was in with a group of friends. We're down in Napa Valley, and we went to this small winery called Rivery. And this wine taster, older gentleman, comes down representing the wine, and I just asked, "Hey, sir, you know, what do you do here? Is you an owner?" He's like, "No, my son owns the winery. I'm retired," which prompts the question, "Okay, sir, you're retired. So, you know, what did you do in your previous career?" He goes like, "Oh, my business partner was Ross Perot. I founded EDS and Associates." I'm like, "No shit, sir." I'm like, okay, well, that obviously prompts the question because I'm pretty curious. I'm like, you know, sir, you know, I'm in technology, and you know, it's a really interesting time. This is actually last March to be exact. And I said, you know, we're playing around with some really interesting technologies. So how did you found EDS Associates? I mean, it's 220,000 people worldwide. And he says, well, we're the people that discovered the implementation of mainframe computing to radically change credit card processing. And I'm like, and it's just kind of a little bit of a light bulb. I'm like, really? Tell me more about that. It's like, yeah. I'm like, we were able to charge $100 million per installation. And we basically cornered the entire financial market because it's such a radical improvement of productivity. And that's a key moment. That is a key moment for like our business strategy on a coin. And I'm kind of looking because we're kind of wondering, like, what is our strategy here? And I'm like, thank you, sir. Because if you look at that kind of moment of time, the EDS Associates was spawned and companies like PeopleSoft. And then if you kind of go in terms of, but what's really important is he focused on big business, big problems to be solved. Whereas there was the capital and the infrastructure and the willingness to change processes. Because basically they got one bank to buy into it, and then all the banks had to do it. And then really the next stage, as you can see on it, is really the introduction to the PC. And when the PC was introduced, that's really when, you know, that kind of semiconductor computing really was introduced to small and medium-sized business. You know, really what kind of spawned Microsoft, where there was this opportunity to thread together platform ideas and concepts that really came from those big mainframe early implementations. And then finally, a little bit later on, you had the consumer adoption, which is like the NES. And really much later on, and I should put this in the slide, in terms of real worldwide penetration, much later on, really the iPhone came out and mobile, and we kind of understand the significance of that. And this is really important. Timing in this market is really critical. What people don't realize, here's a stat. The daily active users in the consumer market for virtual reality is around between 40 and 50,000 a day. That means if you spent $2 million on a VR project, you're pretty much guaranteed to lose $2 million on your VR entertainment project. It's not the moment in time. And you may recognize this photo. This is from Lawrence Arabia as they're about to go through the desert. This is a really critical moment in kind of holographic technology. We kind of have to make it through the desert together. And the other side, there is tremendous opportunity. People see it. And you probably heard people talk about it, and you get excited about it. But market timing to enter this is critically important. Do you have the capital to see through your ideas? And is there going to be a market there when you arrive? Again, this is about risk-taking. And that kind of leads to our strategy. So at Fingerfood, we've been very fortunate, went through this kind of holographic agency program, and we got matched up with PACCAR, kind of part of the Cascadia Quarter Group. So we're very kind of lucky to go through that. And again, so tying these stories together, obviously I met the founder of EDS Associates. We're tied together with PACCAR, and trying to figure out how am I going to tackle this market? How do I approach the market? What is going to be the beacon going to be where people are going to want to spend all this money, hopefully, with my business to transform the big processes? I think there's huge opportunity in the Fortune 150, but I don't know anybody in the Fortune 150. So I'm kind of thinking, and actually this is on a trip. You see this picture, my forming bald spot too. I was actually thinking at that very moment in time, I'm like, God, what is that concept? And I kind of realized as they're kind of talking, that's actually the head of Kenworth, and that's the CTO of PACCAR. And I realized they're on the holodeck. The holodeck, I had this epiphany, I'm on the holodeck. Like, this is as real to them as it's real to me. So I actually went back to Vancouver, and I called up my lawyer. I'm like, because I went and looked online, and I found out that the holodeck trademark had actually been expired. So we actually got to trademark the holodeck. And the reason we did that is because it definitely prompts a memory of something that's impossible to become possibilities. This is kind of a key thing, is like, when you go into conversations and you're going to tell someone we're going to completely change and radically change a productive process, maybe for the first time in 100 years, people have to kind of unhinge their imagination. And that kind of led to like, okay, we also need big spaces. One of the reasons that we actually found this is our holodeck in Port Coquitlam, 25,000 square feet. And people are like, why do you need such a big space? Because then we want to tackle the biggest problems. When we bring clients through that experience, the whole concept is to really unleash their imagination of the possibilities. And and the big thing is at this stage is we trying to move beyond kind of that excitement and demo stage and really discover ROI and be able to articulate that to our clients. So I want to go back in history a little bit further, because this is some stuff that we're finding out. So this is actually a picture, this is out of Manchester. This is actually our creative directors out of his parents' windows, actually, in the 1940s. And what we're learning is we're dealing with these big companies, the Fortune 150, is that there's processes I kind of alluded to that have been around and really haven't changed much in 90 years. This is the flagship truck of the Kenworth fleet, the T680, one of the most advanced trucks on the road. But the production process, which unbeknownst to me, really hasn't changed that much in terms of building these trucks since the Industrial Revolution. In 1920, General Motors decided, hey, when we have a new concept for a truck, we're going to go from a draftsman, drafting something, to do a clay model. And that process didn't change until, think of the PC, until 1985, which is the introduction of AutoCAD. So you go from AutoCAD to a clay model. And then we came in and we said, well, how about we change that process? And so we go from AutoCAD to a hologram. Why is this such a significant moment in time for this company? It's because we changed that process. Instead of from AutoCAD to a full clay model, it took about 6 months. We changed that process to 3 days. And you got to think of a company the size of PACCAR. They have 20 trucks in production. And PACCAR does it, and here's a market opportunity. We're just working with PACCAR. Every automobile companies are going to have to adapt their processes to this kind of changing market. But again, we're working with a company, this is a Fortune 150, that can afford to do those R&D and take those chances and risk. And this kind of concept came, again, kind of back to this picture. This is in their R&D lab of kind of compound innovation. When you can radically change an industrial process that's been around for 100 years, what you're able to do versus your competition that don't react to that is you can quickly do a generational leap above them. That's incredibly important when you're trying to positioning why that you need to kind of adopt this technology. The other area of interest that we've been playing around with, so we have a client, Lowe's, and this was actually just announced last week, March 9th. The significant opportunity, it was kind of alluded to in other conversations around training. One thing that we've found is this is actually the Holo Room. And Lowe's is really trying to rethink their consumer experience, especially competing with Amazon, what's going to get people to come down to the stores. And they definitely realize of training, not just in terms of training from a services standpoint from big companies, but training their consumers how to use their products. And they find, actually, this is an interesting stat, in terms of reading a textbook, people pick up the information about 30%, 6% more retention of information by going through that kind of VR experience. But also, it increased sales. There's a reason to go down, you learn what to buy, and you go do it. It becomes an experience. The other technology I definitely want to talk about besides holographic is definitely artificial intelligence. I think it is actually really mistaken. I hear a lot of comments. I was at a conference on speaking of kind of smart cities, and someone came up on stage and said, hey, the robots are going to take over, and AI is going to cause a bunch of disruption around jobs. And it is going to cause disruption around jobs, but for the benefit of society, because it's going to increase people's productivity in a very profound manner. And here's an example. The Lowe's hologram experience that we did with Lowe's, it actually integrates AI in a very unique way. So instead of actually, I know how many people have kind of redone their kitchen here, kind of gone through the experience. You go through a bunch of different pictures and kind of see what you like. Then you go down to Lowe's or the hardware store, like, oh, what, that kind of makes sense. But instead of doing that, you can go to Pinterest now, click on a bunch of photos you like, submit it to Lowe's, and use machine learning algorithms and machine vision. You can check the Lowe's catalog, and when you go to Lowe's in augmented reality, you have your kitchen, most likely. This is 86% most likely to be your kitchen based upon our inventory. Completely changing that consumer experience and consumer relationship. And you can see how artificial intelligence, again, no one lost their job through that process. It enhanced the consumer experience. But it's important, and this is a critical thing for, I think, for our government out in the crowd here, is we need to really think about retooling that next generation. It's such a critical piece of public policy, because we think of artificial intelligence, it's actually not computer science. This is not programmers. It's much more around statistics and math and deep math and understanding and databases, and how do you actually build a lake of data that you can feed these machine learning algorithms so they can understand, and the business analysts to actually understand how to apply this technology. So again, this is going to create jobs that we haven't even thought of before. And again, I kind of want to end this and kind of where we kind of are with all these technologies. There's kind of this concept of go back to my shot around going through the desert. And again, there's lots of excitement. We have these big conferences, and there's VR talks and shows, and there's a bunch of demos going on, and you go to the future reality, and you're like, this is amazing. But this is really critical. We need to start showing ROI, return on investment. I make an investment, I get money back. And that is what's going to really drive adoption of these technologies in business. And I'm telling you my strategy. I'm sure one of you is like, why is he telling us what he's doing? Because I need your help. We need to make the market together. Like, we're doing design wins. I need more successful companies out there making wins, announcing ideas, so that there's a greater market for all. And this is just incredible opportunities. Think of those ideas. EDS and Associates, founded on the principle of just mainframe computing. Just to be even more crystal clear, they use punch cards, programming to radically transform a process that's been radically transform an entire industry. So if you can use punch cards to radically transform an industry, imagine what's the capability, the potential, the technology we have today. And I think just to kind of close up, I think that if I'm an entrepreneur out in the crowd and I'm kind of hearing my talk today, what are those next steps? Like, how do I approach this industry? And I think number one is to I would actually go down, get a HoloLens, start programming, start learning how to use the technology. But number one, I would actually, once you understand it, you can literally go down to the Fortune, just get a list of companies, Fortune 500, and use your imagination. Company after company, there are processes, I'm telling you, from the Industrial Revolution that haven't changed. We just discovered one, it's been around for 90 years. We have a new client, they've been doing something the same way for 50 years. And we're like, what if we change that? They're like, oh, that will change our business. Another guy's like, well, that's going to change our entire industry. So that's the opportunity that exists in front of you. Thank you.
I'll introduce myself now. I'm Molly Mason-Boulé. There is an accent aigu. I'm the Vice President of Content Production for EA Worldwide Studios.
And I'm Marija Radulovic-Nastic. I'm Vice President for Central Development Services.
So it's a good thing he bypassed our last names, so thank you. Many people don't, and then we correct.
Yeah, exactly.
So where's the clicker? Here we go.
So I'll start us.
So we're pretty excited to talk to you guys today. We really are going to take you through a bit of a retrospective, a very quick one on EA's the past 26 years that EA's been in Vancouver. Talk a little bit about the present day, what we're doing with regard to experiential learning inside the company, and then we're going to talk about what we're doing to groom talent for the future.
Cool. So I was here actually in this venue a couple of years ago, and I was giving a presentation about state of our industry. And that presentation was based on a lot of numbers, data, so it was critical for me to have my notes with me. And I had them on my iPad, and in a moment when I stepped on the stage to give a presentation, my iPad died. And there was a moment of terror there, like, oh my God, what am I gonna do, full room of people. And I was like, okay, go back and think about topic that you're super passionate about, that's really important for the gaming industry, and talk about that. And that was actually first time when I was talking about the importance of the talent in our industry. And knowing how Molly is also super powerful of the same, passionate about the same topic, we decided today to talk about 3 most important things in gaming industry. And that's talent, talent, and talent. So if you're in industry where your end product is not just a game, but it's experience that people are having playing that game, and when your environment is changing so fast that new technologies are there all the time, ability to learn is actually surviving skill. And ability to have the best talent working on your game is what's going to make you successful in the industry. But it's not just how you can attract the best talent, how you can compensate that well, and so that they continue working for you. It is, you basically need a more holistic talent strategy, something that will link your ecosystem, your past, will link to present, what you're doing today, and most importantly, what you're doing in the future to ensure that you continue having that influx of talent to your industry.
So I'm going to take you through a very abbreviated and quick 26-year tour of EA in Vancouver. It's nice for me to see some familiar faces here, and it dovetails really nicely into what I want to share with you about EA. I have a former boss in the audience, so Yay, and she is also an entrepreneur in her own right since she left EA, and that's a really interesting point. EA is a company where if you're self-starting, if you have an entrepreneurial spirit, if you have an idea, you can usually push forward with that stuff inside the company. It's very much a culture where your learning journey is in your own hands, and it's very much a culture that allows you to take the steps that you want to take to grow. And I've had that experience. I know Marija's had that experience. And what that's resulted in as far as building an ecosystem in Vancouver is 3 things. First, we have executives that have left the company and taken that spirit with them and started VC funds that have actually propelled the industry forward in Vancouver. We've also had a lot of employees who have moved on to start their own startups, which have actually in turn employed hundreds of other people in the Lower Mainland. And thirdly, we care a lot about supporting the nonprofit world. We are very well known for our charitable giving, but we're also very, very engaged on having a lot of board seats in organizations like DigiBC, Women in Animation, Women in Games, so advocacy groups as well. So I think what EA has successfully done over the 26 years is really stepped out into the community and taken that experiential learning DNA and really spread it into the success that EA has experienced, but also that the external market has experienced as well. So Marija's going to talk to us about what's going on today inside the company that's continuing this spirit forward.
Cool. So when you're in the industry, again, that's changing constantly the type of skills that you need and type of roles that you have. And you can't just rely on going out and trying to hire the right talent, simply because some of the skills and some of the jobs that we need today didn't even exist a few years ago. So type of people that we are hiring currently in EA is very different than it was 5, 6, 7 years ago. So in those situations, again, you cannot just go and hire for the right skill set. The best bet is go and hire for aptitude for learning, make a culture that has learning as a core value, and provide rich and holistic way for professional development and training people that you currently employ. So to give you a couple of examples of what EA does currently basically to train and to do professional development, support the professional development of our staff. So besides sending people to industry conferences, we run a lot of internal conferences where we have cross-functional groups working together, sharing, learning, and discussing some of the hot topics. So, for example, EA DevCon is equivalent of GDC in our industry, when we have literally hundreds of people, different roles, cross-functional roles, everywhere from designers, programmers, artists, quality verification, localization, coming together and discussing VR, AR, storytelling, competitive gaming, whatever is a hot topic at this point. And basically, the other example is, for example, Frostbite Days. Frostbite is our proprietary engine that powers majority of the console and PC games in EA. So last year, we had more than 400 people that developed the games powered by Frostbite engine coming together and discussing what's the best way to take advantage of the powerful engine and deliver beautiful gaming experiences. Another example is something that we call managing for results. So EA moved away from the traditional performance reviews when you sit once per year with your employees and rank them. You're above the targets, significantly above the targets, and so on. But believe that the most appropriate way to manage talent is actually to constantly have those ongoing discussions, giving a feedback. So we have programs that teaching our managers and leaders to do that. It is a very powerful tool if applied correctly. The other one that, again, both Molly and I are very, very passionate about, it's called inclusion in EA. So if you think about a gamer and demographics of gamers are changing rapidly. With the growth of the industry powered by mobile games, all of a sudden you have way more female in the games, playing the games, as well as older generation. So what we believe is that only if you have inclusive and diverse environment of game makers serving that market, you will have a games and experience that can fit the need of that market. So that inclusion of EA is a program that we expect all our RFTs, all our full-time employees to go through and learn about how to behave and foster dynamic, diverse and inclusive environments. So those are just some of examples of the rich programs that we have in EA to develop people and increase their acumen in leadership and business understanding.
So we're pretty excited about managing for results in particular because it really taps back into that self-starting nature. Everyone's responsible for their performance. It's a really regular way to just talk to your boss and not have it be a surprise-eyes conversation. It's really about how do we make you the best you can be and how do you take responsibility for that. So it's pretty exciting for us. But really what's the best thing to talk about in this entire 15 minutes that Marija and I share is Play to Learn. So we're really excited to share with you what this is about. Play to Learn is a new program that we recently began rolling out in North America. What it is us partnered with a company called EverFi. And our mission is to make math and basic coding skills and engineering accessible to students in between the 8th and 10th grade. It's married very closely to the current math curriculum, so this isn't sort of a distraction or a detour from normal curriculum for math and science. But what it does is it makes it relatable, it makes it practical. And I manage a lot of the content creators in the company, and we have a very technical medium these artists are working in. So embracing a STEAM curriculum and making math accessible to the creative kid in the class, the one that might wind up being the technical artist one day, I'm really excited about that, because these programs are designed to actually engage all kids, not just the kids that are the math whiz. It's really reducing the barrier to entry for everyone. Teachers can put their arms around this curriculum in 15 minutes or less, believe it or not, and it's a very flexible web-based program that can be rolled out at any time. So we're pretty excited about this one, and Marija's going to take you through where we've rolled it out and what our results are so far.
So as you can see, 4 areas, if you want, where we already implemented this program is, first of all, Vancouver mainland, then Bay Area around San Francisco, Los Angeles, South California, and also in Orlando and Florida. Here in BC, we have 35 schools where we already implement this program. So more than 1,700 students are touched by Play to Learn. So the latest rollout was actually in Orlando. And last week, we were like debriefing and watching videos from that rollout. And it was amazing. It was really, really interesting watching kids whose eyes lit and they get really, really engaged. So the way we do it is, if you're a game maker, if you're a video game maker, you have a topic that is of interest and really engages kids. So we invite them in the studio and we show them how we make games. We introduce them to people working for EA so they can hear stories from software engineers, from designers about how they make their magic. And then we link that to the career in STEAM and kind of spark the interest to pursue careers in science, technology, engineering, art, or math. And then we basically link them back to the Play to Learn program and introduce them to some basic concepts of the STEAM-based professions. And it really works nicely. So we are, as Molly said, very, very excited to spread-heading this program. And we hope that with programs like this, we'll ensure that we have that influx in talent in the future that we need. So it's good for our kids, it's great for our communities, and it's also very good for our industry and our business.
So we're pretty excited about that, and we appreciate your time today. If you want more information on Play to Learn, you can find us both on LinkedIn and the normal social media channels. You can also contact EverFi. We have an account manager at EverFi who'd be happy to give you details. Her name is Mandeep, so you can come and see us for Mandeep's business card as well. And beyond that, thanks for having us.
Thank you.